just finished Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I wanted to give you guys a really quick video review on it to tell you my thoughts on it. As you guys know on my channel, I do not give review scores anymore. I just tell you the things I liked and the things I didn't like about a game, and it's up for you to determine if it is for you. I will tell you that Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is a phenomenal game with two major hitches that I think really ultimately hinder the experience overall. I think in a year or two from now, people who've played this game will look back on it fondly and remember the way that Nintendo did a very unique art style. I think people will look back on it fondly and appreciate that Zelda took some of their other assets from other games and found a way to cleverly weave them into this universe, like with chain chomps and with Goombas and with piranha plants, and it was a lot of fun. But I think people will also look back on it in a couple years and say, man, that game was a slog to play moment to moment. And because it's a portable game, and because it's a game that is really bite-sized, because Nintendo Switch is kind of meant to turn on and off rapidly, maybe it works. Maybe you just play, and when you get frustrated, you just turn it off and you come back and you play for another hour or so and you turn it off again. This is definitely not one of those games I think you're gonna sit down and play like I played Breath of the Wild for hours and hours on end, lose yourself in the world, lose yourself in the universe, and go off and explore every nook and cranny. While this game does have a very directed approach to how I want you to complete it, with a very serialized dungeon pattern, with items that have to be opened and used to progress on in the story, it does lend itself to some fun exploration, but I think you're gonna get burnt out on it very quickly because of the graphics and because of the poor item utilization that you will find throughout your adventure. First, let's talk about the graphics. Now, there's been a lot of videos on this talking about, the frame rate stuttering and, is it gonna get better? Well, I'm here to tell you on 2020, it is not. I played the game, a digital copy of the game installed on my Nintendo Switch. That means I did not use a game cartridge. That means I did not use an external memory card. So this is supposed to be the premier way to play. This was supposed to reduce loading times, and this was supposed to reduce any kind of latency that you experience throughout your adventure. Unfortunately, that was not the case for me. I consistently, and I would say consistently, probably every 15 to 20 seconds, experience a frame rate stutter that would drop the frame rates down to, if not the single digits, very, very close to them. I'm talking anywhere sub 15 frames a second, which at that point looks like a flipbook, okay? And what that does is it breaks the immersion. It's extremely frustrating because you're running, you're having fun, you're swinging your sword through the grass, collecting rupees, you're doing the side quests where you're fishing or doing the claw game or anything else, it doesn't matter. And all of a sudden, for unknown reasons, the game will just come to a grinding halt. During that time, frames will stutter, your controls will kind of get a little bit of wonkiness, it's hard to control your character, and the game just seems to want to just die. And it's like, it almost kickstarts itself, and then everything comes back up, and everybody's happy, and then here comes that dark cloud again. And this will happen consistently for you, in any room, at any time, for any reason. And you could be in the most tightly closed space with very little going on, and it'll still find a way to rear its ugly head. And it really does break the immersion. There's really no other way to put it. And I think ultimately it hurts the game because it does break that immersion. And because you're gonna look back on it and say, oh my God, like this game just doesn't seem to get out of its own way. You're gonna have a lot of times where you're just gonna get frustrated. You're gonna put down the controller and say, I'm done. I don't wanna deal with this right now because it's just ruining the experience. As where I played Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for hours and hours on end, and I would just get lost in these grand adventures, cutting down trees and finding hidden caves and temples and just exploring the world. You're not gonna be doing that on this game because the frame rate's gonna constantly limit you from doing so, and you're just gonna get fed up and quit. And then after a couple hours or a couple days, you're gonna come back to it and you'll be like, it's not so bad. And then you're gonna get burnt out. And it's gonna happen again and again and again throughout your entire experience. The second problem that I had with the game was the item utilization. The very first item you get in the game is an ability that allows you to jump, which is cool because you really think about it, and jumping should be synonymous with Zelda games. Being able to run and jump, you're gonna be able to jump over pits, you're gonna be able to jump over deep water or lava or over enemies, or explore areas that you weren't previously able to get to. Unfortunately, the game's reliance on this jump mechanic is gonna render one of your item slots pretty much inoperable for the entire game because you're gonna always need to have jump equipped. So a lot of the cool combinations and a lot of cool items that you're gonna get later on are gonna only be able to use one at a time. As an example, a lot of dungeons, you'll go in, you'll find enemies that roll this giant log at you. The only way to combat it is to jump over it. You'll go in a lot of dungeons that have bottomless pits. You go in a lot of dungeons that have lava walls or long gaps where you have to sprint and, you guessed it, jump over them. You're not gonna be able to do that if you don't have jump equipped, duh. So unfortunately, you're gonna constantly have this jump equipped. If you decide to get creative and say, you know what, I'm not gonna use it. You go to your item menu and you're gonna switch things out. Let's say you wanna use the bombs and the bow and arrow, which make an amazing combination because when shot together, you actually shoot explosive bombs, which is really fun to take out large groups of enemies, which is really fun to clear out things on the other side. It is involved pretty extensively later on in the puzzles. Or if you want to use the magic powder and a boomerang or something like that. These different types of weapons that aren't a feather, you're not going to be able to do that because guaranteed within a minute or two, you're going to walk into an area where you're going to have to jump. You're going to have to jump over a pit, you're going to have to jump over a bridge, whatever, and there's no other way around it. So if you like using a hook shot, good, because that's all you're going to be using because your other item is going to be bound to the stupid jump mechanic. And it just constantly bogs the game down. Every time you think you're done with it, you're not. Why didn't it make this a dedicated button? I don't know. They really basically did, honestly. But the fact that you can't use two items outside of more traditional Zelda gameplay where you're typically used to using two different things and having fun with a little bit of range of mechanics in terms of exploration is going to be hindered because you're constantly going to be juggling in that pause menu, switching out your inventory for your jump mechanic and whatever you need at the time, like a hook shot or a bow and arrow or a bomb or whatever. And you're going to constantly be jumping back and forth. So when you're not playing the game, and you're not being disrupted by the constant frame rate issue, you're gonna be disrupted by constantly going into this pause menu and manipulating your gear. And that stop and go jerkiness, I think, is the overall impression I'm left with the game. Despite the fact that it has a beautiful soundtrack, very charming characters, very fun, rich Zelda-like environment to explore, beautiful graphics, really, really a lot of fun to seek out and see what's going on this island. You're gonna constantly be hindered by bad mechanics and bad performance. And I think that's gonna constantly cause the game to come to a grinding halt. And I don't think you're gonna be able to get lost in the universe like you would have on other games. I would say that in the future, I think that if Zelda games can at least nail the performance, maybe I would be a little more willing to accept that there are these golden items, so to speak, that are required to basically play through an adventure. I would think maybe I could say, okay, but when you're constantly being hit with multiple things that do everything in their power to stop you from having fun, to having these long, fluid experiences, the game really self-sabotages itself, and it does great on you because there are a lot of things to do in this game. There's a lot of side quests that ultimately lead to items that are useful. You're gonna need to collect different musical instruments at the end of all these dungeons. You have to do 8 different dungeons. There's an optional dungeon that if you wanna do, you can. There's optional items you can get or not get depending on how much of these side quests that you complete, depending on how much of the world you're willing to explore and find things out. So there's a lot to do here. This isn't one of those games where it's very like, here's the golden path, you'll beat it soon. There's a lot of stuff that needs to take place in order to happen. And because of the way that this game was designed, probably because of limitations on the Game Boy when it initially came out, there are a lot of backtracking and there are a lot of places that you get to in the Metroidvania, like it's like, oh, if I only had this item, I could get to this next point. So you leave, you go off and do something, you get said item, and then you have to work your way back. So it's a dense experience, and I don't use that word in a bad way. There's a lot to do here, but when you're constantly being hit with these self-imposing sabotages the game puts on you, it does become a slog. And I think that's probably the best way to describe it overall, is that as fun as it is, as beautiful as it is, it really does kind of hurt the experience. Now, I was a big fan of it. I liked the ending. I liked that they included these really cool little animated short intro and outro scenes. It's kind of anime style cartoon. I thought that was very cool. I liked that there were a lot of optional characters and a lot of really fun nod backs to other Zelda IPs, as I mentioned earlier, that are in the universe. So they did a good job of world building. This definitely wasn't a simple rehashing of an old experience. There was a lot of thought put into this and a lot of care put into this that I thought really brought the game together overall. But these hindering technical effects and technical limitations just really bring the game down. Major for me, significantly, so much so that it really did kind of, you know, overshadow what I think the game was trying to be. So there you guys have it, my thoughts on Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch. I hope you guys found this video informative. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.